Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Crusty Canuck live stream. Very special episode today. With me in the studio or in his barn on the other side of the country is Mr. Willaim Ray, owner
Oh,
operator of StormHaven Media. He's also a veteran too, and we've got some interesting stories to talk about today on the live stream. So please stick around. Oh, and swearing and smoking will happen. So listener and viewer discretion is advised. Cheers.
Stay updated and follow Crusty Canuck on Facebook, Twitter, Gab, Telegram, YouTube, and Podbean. Subscribe today and donate at crustycanuck.ca.
And that wasn't the intro. That was the segue. But still, nice to say, welcome to the Crusty Canuck podcast, ladies and gentlemen. With me today is Mr. Willaim Ray, freelance writer, entrepreneur, farmer, veteran, all-around Canadian, and a truther. Willaim, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
how you doing, sir?
Not too bad. Not too bad.
We're having a nice foggy day here in Nova Scotia.
Outstanding. And the hurricane didn't affect you too much?
No, it was a typical winter storm. For me, I'm on top of a hill about a mile from the ocean, so the wind is it's a constant feature. So no, it wasn't bad for me. There are a lot of people in the central section that are still without power, without food, but locals have already organized a bunch of convoys in there with generators and whatnot, and a lot of people here still have wood stoves and stuff like that. So it's we're okay. It's not a major disaster by any means. Not Nova Scotia, as far as I know. Newfoundland, that looks like a bit of a different story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, PEI and Port aux Basques, Newfoundland got hit the hardest.
They did.
Yeah. Well, hearts and prayers go out to those individuals if they're listening in that area. If not, please pass our messages of respect and gratitude that a lot of them came out of there alive. So for sure. So Willaim, please tell my audience a bit of your background and your history in regards to what got you into freelance journalism. You spent some time in the military.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I spent 10 years in the Canadian Forces, and I guess I was always kind of a news hound. I read constantly, and I ended up going to Croatia with 2 PPCLI battle group in '93 and being involved in the Medak pocket, being in the line in the Medak pocket with Rod Deering's section there. And so I guess one thing for sure, as a news hound, I got to Yugoslavia, and certainly the narrative that had been presented that what I believed was going on from watching the mainstream media at home. Like, I'm quite young. I'm like 20, 23, 24, 25. And, what I saw on the ground were completely different things. So I think that really, was an eye-opening sort of, okay, you know what? They lie to you a lot. And then, I guess around 2008, I started writing a little bit. I got involved with Citizen Radio and, sort of specializing in military and foreign affairs. And then I was living in Montreal, and I started with something called Concordia University Television, which gave members access to TV cameras and a little bit of training. It was like a university-funded student group, but it was open to the public. And right after that, the student strike broke out in 2012, and I ended up as a live stream cameraman. And I took some of the rowdier footage in the student strike. This stuff was used by CBC. It was used in inquiries, couple of trials. And since then, I had a blog going, and then I guess in 2015-16, I started noticing, to me, what was an obvious whole of society program, i.e. sort of a color revolution, with the identity politics and a bunch of other things coming in such a coordinated way. So I started writing on that, and that's what I've been doing for the last 5-10 years. I wrote, I guess the most read thing I ever wrote was for Quillette It's an Australian publication run by Claire Lehman. I wrote on.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I wrote an article on Peggy McIntosh, the lady who gave us white privilege. And yeah, it turns out her daddy, Winthrop J. Means the third.
That sounds like a Gilligan's Island character.
It does. I wouldn't even make that shit up though. So Peggy McIntosh, her real name, turned out to be Margaret Vance Means. Her daddy, Winthrop J. Means, in 1958, sold a patent personally to IBM, Lucent Technologies, and Nokia for what he called a memory device. It was a series of very thinly sliced different metals with electric rods that went through it. And for the first time in human history, you could digitally store and retrieve and change information. It's the father of all processors. Right.
So she comes from a good background.
Yeah, when she talks about privilege, and even in her rather pedantic essay that started off this whole garbage, she admits that, oh, well, there are other types of privilege, including an economic privilege, but does not at any point mention that she's one of the wealthier people in the United States of America and was born that way. Right. So, you know, and in another part of the essay, she says that this essay is based on my life experience. So this has been jammed down thousands of university kids or ex-university kids wrote to me, like on Twitter and shit, saying, oh my God, why didn't you write this before I had to listen to this shit for 4 years? Yeah. So yes, I got about 13 million original views. Yeah.
Well, that's excellent. Well done on you.
Well, like I said, a lot of people like it was like, oh, for Christ's sake, you know. So yeah, and then COVID came out, and after I got out of the military, I actually went to university, Simon Fraser University, for 3 years and took biochemistry. So that gave me a little bit of a head start on the whole fucking COVID thing. So right off the bat, from a lot of the so-called science and these videos out of China, because anybody who understands how China works, your average Chinese citizen cannot take a cell phone video and put it on the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
If they do, they're going to be in jail real quick.
Yeah.
Right. Because every electronic device has to be registered to you, and they own the cell works.
It's monitored heavily. Yeah. Everything they do electronically is monitored. We all know that too.
And then, you know, with all the Trudeau stuff, so I started looking into Trudeau and you know, exactly what was behind this nobody Liberal Party. And I started to run into Tides Canada, which will feature largely in our narrative tonight. So I guess, yeah, and tonight, so I guess I'll throw it out there. I'm gonna work with Crusty here, and we're gonna have a big links thing under the video there. So you'll be able to have a look at the source material for everything I'm telling you. It's gonna be a hell of a story. Buckle the fuck up. It's gonna come at you like a fire hose. So I guess I'll start with the idea of a color revolution. A color revolution.
Okay. Just tell my audience what a color revolution is. From what you were told, from what you've seen, and what your perspective of it is.
Sure. In the modern sense, probably the first example we saw of this was in 2005. Clearly identifiable example, and even academics agree that the Orange Revolution in Ukraine was a colored revolution. It was sponsored by George Soros. And again, you can get this in academic work, billions of dollars. So the base theory of a color revolution is simply this. You go into a society, you find somebody that has a problem, which, I mean, any society on earth, you're going to find people that have a problem.
Oh, there's grievance everywhere, somewhere. Yeah.
Sure. So then you enable them and you radicalize them. You radicalize them in terms of, no, you know, you got to do something. They, you know, certainly they'll even go as far as to manufacture events to radicalize this group. And we're going to talk about that later. So you radicalize the group and you enable them. You give them training, you give them contacts to big tech, which allows them to make sure their content is seen where they want it seen. And you create a social problem, right? And if you do it the right way, if you hit the society in the right place where there is probably an actual problem. In our case, we've seen them try and run the BLM narrative up here, but it just doesn't really catch on with Black Canadians themselves, right? It didn't really catch on because we don't have the same history. With Indigenous people, a little bit different story. So this is the avenue that they have come at us mainly through, and it has been going on for a while. Boys and girls, this didn't start with Justin Trudeau or COVID. You've been at war for at least a decade. You just didn't know it. So billions of foreign dollars have poured into Canada through the guise of private foundations, right? And this is, the Suzuki Foundation, this foundation, they're just myriad all over the place. One of the most notable, and the one we will talk about tonight, is George Soros's sponsored Tides Canada. Now
they're called the Make Way Foundation now, are they not?
They may have changed their name. I will refer to them as Tides Canada.
As Tides, yeah. And they're supposed to be the environmental revolutionaries that are supposed to make everything green.
What they really are is they are simply they're a money man. They're a bag man. They dole out into the billions over a decade of dollars. Most of that money comes from George Soros, or came from George Soros' parent foundation, which is Open Societies. So this is a granting organization. This organization itself don't do shit. It's a bunch of people in an office, but it's a bunch of people in an office with millions and millions of bucks in a fucking checkbook. So here, just let me open my computer here.
Sure thing.
Yeah, so the color revolution theory has been used here for a very long time, really. And certainly we know that the Liberals are the ones, the Liberal Party is the one that sort of out of the blue struck the Truth and Reconciliation Committee or panel, commission, sorry. And, I'm not going to argue that there shouldn't have been such a thing, but the conditions they set for it really allowed for any kind of narrative to be spun. And the conclusions it came to under academic study, a lot of them have fallen apart, like the numbers of kids that went to the residential schools, this sort of thing. So this sort of thing stoked a lot of anger in some parts of the Indigenous community. The other thing I think I would note there is that starting in the late 1990s, early 2000s, Indigenous media themselves started writing about having a big problem with white activists with bagfuls of money coming into their communities, finding n'importe ne'er-do-well, like somebody who not necessarily was an activist, and hey, want to make a whole boatload of money? And suddenly they're an environmental activist or whatever is required. And we saw this in the so-called Wet'suwet'en.
A shit disturber, basically.
Well, yeah, most of the community there supports, and I will leave links to someone who is a member of that band and who writes their own blog, and they'll tell you straight up. And these Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs, they run their thing like the mob, basically. They're trespassing on hunting, trapping rights, and every other goddamn thing, right? The Wet'suwet'en office of the Wet'suwet'en chiefs was funded by Tides Canada to the tune of $220,000 over 4 years, from 2014 to 2017. The link will be there. Yes, indeed. And they are a wholly created thing. There were Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs. 2 of them were women. They fired them, got these 2 guys in there one of whom has I believe, a criminal record and not a good name in the community. Suddenly they're the new chiefs because they bought the election. And that's the people that you saw walking around in their little beaded robes. But these guys aren't actually doing anything. It's activists and media experts from New York and whatnot. So, all right, I've got a bit ahead of myself. So in 2008 in New York City, there was a conference that was called Civil Society 2.0. This conference was hosted by the Obama State Department. It included Google, IBM, Facebook, Twitter, all of big tech was there. Open societies was there. A lot of governments were represented. The Canadian government had a delegation, a bunch of different European governments. The EU had a delegation. And this was all about empowering civil society, grassroots groups, and empowering them to change the world through, networking. And this conference was actually a training session. So they flew in and put up activists from all over the world, all kinds of different people. They also brought in a lot of academics, and they set up a network that's still operating to this day through Canadian academia. Okay? So a lot of the focus here was on how to use the new technologies, new social media technology. So they had the heads of, the guys from Google and Twitter that actually put the algorithms together, all this shit. So they came in, they trained these guys how to do this at a level that like you would have to pay a lot of money to get. And they also hooked them into networks where, okay, you're having a problem, you can't get your content out, call this guy on his phone at his desk, and he will sort you, right? So you're networking together the activist world. This is where the activist world and big tech really got into bed. So over the next couple of years, you start to see the color revolution, or the so-called Arab Spring, start popping up in the Middle East. The Arab Spring, a lot of those people were at that conference. Absolutely. And what were the characteristics of the Arab Spring and all this? Was the use of Facebook and Twitter. Look at how activists around the world are because they were trained to do it.
Just
right?
and we now manipulate the whole platform just to get their words out there. I mean, classic manipulation.
Sure, and same people that trained them are the people who caused the color revolution. I mean, now we can see, 10 years or whatever in hindsight, that it was all a gag. I mean, Libya looks like fucking a wasteland. It's I'm trying to think of the movie with the guys in the cars. God damn it. Anyway, it's
Mad Max.
Yes, it's Mad Maxville down there, man. It's literally Mad Maxville. It's just roaming militia bands, do whatever the fuck they want, except in the oil concessions, right? So, so 2008, and again, the link will be there with some very exhaustive look at this. And so suddenly, I guess the first instance we see of this popping up in Canada is Idle No More. Idle No More pops up 2013, 2014, 2014. Idle No More pops up. Idle No More got $75,000 from Tides in 2014. Idle No More, the Canadian public knows this as a grassroots, Indigenous-led movement, right? Nope. This movement was founded by a woman named Jessica Gordon. Jessica Gordon is a professor at the University of Saskatchewan, and if you read her papers online, I'll put a couple down there, it's all about white people evil. All of it. Yeah.
I've heard of that name, yes.
So, okay, so she, hang on, my computer's shut here. Okay, so, here's a quote from grassroots truthout.org, an article when Idle No More started. When Jessica Gordon first created a Facebook page titled "Idle No More" to communicate with 3 other women educators, these are the Indigenous women that became the public face of Idle No More, but they're not the ones that started it. To communicate with 3 other women educators and students in Saskatchewan about Canada's Bill C-45, she had no idea that she had chosen the name of what would become a global movement within 2 months. Okay, she didn't choose the name. Some boys down on Madison Avenue chose the name. She's the vehicle. Okay? So they would have had a lot of the network. They would have already had those banners we saw, those like one of those plastic banners to print something like that's about $4,000 for those big street covering ones.
Yeah.
They were ready to go across Canada like that because they were already printed. Right? The media they got was already done. It was all pro. And of course, all the social media can be keyed to make sure that everybody around the country sees their content. Every day, boom, 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 boom. And yeah, like Facebook groups and Twitter groups and all that sprung up across the country. So a lot of Indigenous people got involved, having no idea that this wasn't a completely Indigenous-led thing, because that's what we were all told. So, no big deal. They closed a few bridges. They had totally peaceful protests, no big problems. What they did do, though, is they created a network of people across the country. They connected some Indigenous activists, but mostly university type white or Canadian activists, and a lot of international ones, right? I knew a guy, no names, no pactrel, Indigenous activist near Montreal. He was being flown to Greece and all over Canada, right? He didn't have no money, right? But they flew him, they kept him there a month when the anarchists and all this were going. So you're creating networks. That's how this works. Sell networks. So no problem. So Idle No More goes by. So right around the same time it pops up through an Al Jazeera piece done by a guy named Franklin Lopez, and put a pin in his name. We're definitely coming back to that fella.
Okay.
About the Unistoten people and how they had this evil gas pipe that was going to be shoved across their territory. The Unistoten would morph into the Wet'suwet'en after about 2 years. Because at first, like the Wet'suwet'en Indigenous nation is made up of clans. So at first they only had one clan under their control, which was the Unistoten. But as their influence, they set up the
they got bigger.
Well, they set up the traditional elder thing. Once they bought that out, put their boys in there, that was it. They took over the whole thing, and then they could call themselves Wet'suwet'en. Before that, the elected, right? Because these hereditary leaders are not like the Indian Act elected band government. They're not at all. They're a totally separate thing, right? They don't actually legally have any authority, but they've managed to get such a foothold in the population, or through whatever means they're having their way down there. So this is how you create a narrative, right? Most of the people in the original piece aren't from there at all. Even the Indigenous ones aren't actually members of the Unistoten at all. They're shipped in Indigenous activists. So they
from all parts
create
of North America, or just a Canadian?
No, they're Canadian, but they're not from that band. A lot of them are from the city, and they have Indigenous status cards, but they never lived probably 5 minutes on a res anywhere. Right?
Well, I just got to do a bit of an identification here, Willaim. We'll get right back to that.
Sure.
Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, my guest tonight is Willaim Ray, freelance writer and blogger and owner and operator of StormHaven Media. If you want to reach Willaim, you can. Just look at the red bottom of the screen there. StormHaven1@live.com. Ask me your questions. And we'll have links to all these great stories in my description when we're finished this video, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll be right back after this.
Stay updated and follow Crusty Canuck on Facebook, Twitter, Gab, Telegram, YouTube, and Podbean. Subscribe today and donate at crustycanuck.ca.
And ladies and gentlemen, we're back at Crusty Canuck Live. My special guest is Willaim Ray, Canadian military veteran, also a staunch writer and a staunch researcher, truther, citizen journalist, entrepreneur, family man, farmer, all around great Canadian too. I'm blessed to have him on this show to give me insight here. And I just want to remind my audience too, in no way are we making light of what happened to the First Nations in this country. We are in no way making light of any visible minority or any kind of group that has been somewhat marginalized. We are not prejudiced here at the Crusty Canuck podcast. I personally don't tolerate any kind of that prejudice whatsoever. So if anyone's clenching their pearls thinking we're going to disenfranchise the First Nations, no, it's not going to happen. I don't believe in that, because my best friend in the world, which I still talk to on a regular basis, we've been friends since 1990, is Dene from the Yukon. So when people want to start pointing fingers and call Willaim and myself, oh, you're white supremacists, wrong. We're trying to find the truth here, ladies and gentlemen, because we are firm believers in truth and reconciliation. And we'll be getting more to that later into the show too, ladies and gentlemen. So Willaim, you were saying in regards to the activists, a lot of them were shipped in from all parts of the country.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, while some of these people may be Indigenous, they're not from that community. And a lot of them, like I said, they're from the cities, they're from the different university programs. The universities are an open sewer and a recruiting ground for the zombie soldiers of the New World Order, basically. So yeah, and we saw it during the blockades. You could see visually that a lot of these people were very white little college kid looking guys that were blocking.
Oh, that's the thing. The footage from True North and Rebel Media, like even some of the legacy media were taking footage of the so-called protesters, and you could tell they were white kids. You could tell that they were white people. And
that's not an accident. That's the network that we're talking about tonight. That's who puts those people on the ground and even pays to transport them across Canada, because it's a very well-funded network. So 2014, they began to build the narrative of the Unistoten and then Wet'suwet'en through Al Jazeera and a bunch of other, and this guy Franklin Lopez, who will pop up a little bit later. When the rail blockades themselves start in 2019, Franklin Lopez was running a series of websites that were giving people instructions on how to use thermite to cut rail tracks, how to make Molotov cocktails, and a whole bunch of fun stuff.
Sounds like a nice fellow.
Recently, he was contracted because he makes video, right? He made the video for Al Jazeera. And recently, he made a video about now the Wet'suwet'en have now transferred into some Fairy Creek logging protest, yes? So he was contracted by the CBC to go and make a documentary about that. And this is after, and I had sent this information to Cosman Deserza, sorry if I got the name wrong, bro, over at True North, and they actually ran with the story, and they talked about how these sites were connected to a Montreal anarchist site that's been talking about making Molotov cocktails and burning the whole thing down for years, but magically still there. Mm-hmm. So we get into the rail blockades. So one of the connections made here, and one of the big parts of the network, is a group of organizations that exist on university campuses in Canada, across Canada, called Public Interest Research Groups. These things track back to a CFR member in the 1970s in the United States. He created them around U.S. campuses, and then it came up here. And I'm gonna wait and talk at the end in detail about these PIRGs, but they're very important. And here's where your listeners can take some direct action with their local university. So Yeah, so we have the rail blockades in 2019, but okay, so between you've got them starting to build the Wet's Wet narrative in 2014. Between 2014 and 2017, they were engaged in the Decolonize Canada campaign, the Cancel Canada Day campaign. Remember on the yeah, very, suddenly they're showing up at Parliament Hill and setting up teepees and all that kind of stuff, right? That's the exact same network, right? And it's those college kids, right? Carleton University transported the teepees there, Carleton University money through OPERG, Carleton University, right? So just before Christmas in 2018, the Roll On for Canada convoy announced that it was going to head for Ottawa. In December 30th, 2018, right before 2018, a call-out video was done by a group that called itself Power Shift Young and Rising Canada, although this was never registered as any kind of nonprofit. They held a conference at Carleton University, February 14th to 18th. Now, the convoy is going to arrive February 18th, 19th, right? So they flew in activists from all over the country, and again, it'll be in links on the video. They held training sessions and it's, like a training syllabus. We've all seen, a class schedule.
Yeah.
So yeah, for one entire afternoon, they studied blockades, setting up and maintaining blockades. In another afternoon, they studied rappelling. They actually went out and were taught how to rappel, how to use rappelling gear, how to abseil. And I don't know if anybody recalls, but right before the rail blockades, there were a bunch of doorknobs hanging off, I believe it's Capilano Bridge or whatever in Vancouver, right by the port there.
Oh, okay, because there are a few people in kayaks in the bay there protesting.
Right, but there were also a bunch hanging off the bridge, and they were saying the ships couldn't pass because it's a navigation thing, right? Although, strangely not arrested. One of the guys hanging off that bridge was one of the trainers at the conference. He did an interview under the bridge. He was one of the trainers at the conference. Another trainer at the conference was a woman named Harsha Walia. Some of you may recognize that name. She's the ex-head of the BC Civil Liberties organization, worked there until she tweeted out "burn it all" while they were burning churches over the mass grave.
Oh yes, okay, yeah.
She was one of the instructors. She was teaching them how to move the Overton window. They also had Avi Lewis in attendance, giving them media training with other pros from CBC level media.
I remember him from City TV.
Stephen Lewis, the NDP, author of the LEAP Manifesto with his wife, the shock doctrine lady, Naomi Campbell. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Now, these individuals, they have ties to the Extinction Rebellion too, that big wave.
Yes. Well, they came up, that LEAP Manifesto is basically a precursor to the Extinction Rebellion.
Okay.
So yeah, so they're tied in. So they give this training, and then when the convoy arrives, there's a big protest of Indigenous people with all these signs about water protector and this and that. I've got photos of them making the signs at the conference. The conference was put on by the Ontario Public Interest Research Group of Carleton University. It was held on the campus. People were transported with money. Now, from the university, basically taxpayer money. And yeah, so the training given out there caused massive economic disruption and a few other violations of the Anti-Terrorism Act. Right? That's terrorism. When you cut a country up, cut its rail lines up, that's terrorism.
Well, big time. It's the same thing as they try to promote when the last convoy is. And, personally, okay, I disagreed with them stopping the border, but the point was made and they relinquished peacefully. There was no issues, but you're seeing the contrast from what they're doing with the railheads. You got the information. I remember watching it on all all media. I watched it on legacy media, and I watched independent media too. And they intentionally tried to destroy these railway tracks.
Oh yeah, they're throwing burning shit at trains, man. Yeah,
exactly. And yet no one made a big stink about it. What was said in Parliament about it?
Well,
sweet fuck all.
Right, but here's the thing. This multi-million-dollar conference and training session, really, because at the end of the day, that's what it would cost. This was paid for, and it was on their own sites. This was paid for by CUPW, by Unifor the Union, and a bunch of other union groups. And
I remember when unions used to be for the workers, not for political agenda.
Sure. And the major funder was 350.org. That's a fucking foreign group. So you literally have foreign funding of terrorist training on Canadian soil, and the RCMP don't give a fuck. Right? And I mean,
I based out of there, Willaim?
Informed the RCMP of everything that's in that. They don't give a shit. So okay, let me get back over. So we've got the
where's 350 based out of?
They're the ones that put on the huge climate marches every year, the Earth Day. Okay. And Guilbeault, Stéphane Guilbeault, very close ties with 350.org.
He's a putz. Yeah, he's a schmuck. Yeah. I get he has some intelligence, but he's
a dangerous for sure, and he's a
dangerous mofo. Yeah, big time.
He's a fucking lunatic. He is a true believer, and he don't give a fuck. This guy. So, so this is paid for in various ways by taxpayer money, and of course the authorities not only ignore it, but they actually push the roll-on to Canada convoy off into the snow. So these guys could actually be in front of the Parliament. So fun. But again, so these are the same networks. So it's these PERGs that are in these universities across Canada. They are the ones that mobilize and put the boots in the street. Because universities, you can put up a sign to march for, I don't know, more chicken wings on Thursday, and you'll get people come out. Because I'm in university. I got to go protest some stuff.
More drum circles on Sundays, please. Oh, my goodness. Yes,
sure.
We need more. 5, 6, 7, 8.
And during the blockades, and again, this is in the article, there's direct evidence from their own tweets of American activists being bussed across the border.
I've heard of that. Yes, I've heard of that.
I've got their tweets. I've got their tweets, right? So, so then, we have the blockades, and then neatly bookending the whole Corona thing, we have suddenly the discovery of mass graves. So what happens, we wake up one morning to a headline that went around the world, saying 215 bodies of 215 children discovered in mass grave. That headline first appeared in Australia within an hour of the chief's press conference announcing the finding, which happened on Friday at 4:00. Kashmir held a press conference with Dr. Sarah Bellew, who we're going to get to in just a second.
Okay.
And announces the sad finding of these graves, and you've got Dr. Bellew nodding gravely. And then a network went into action. That's who threw down all those statues. That's who was throwing all those demos. It wasn't Indigenous. There was a lot of doubt right from the start in the actual Indigenous community. Right from the start, they were like, this does not sound right. Right? So it was the statues and all that. That was, and you can see it. And if you look at the footage of this stuff, Jaggy Singh and the boys, who we'll get to later, have been throwing down the Victoria statue in Montreal for about 4 years on and off, or painting it anyway. They hadn't thrown it down.
And they torn it down in Winnipeg at the legislature there.
Sure. But again, look at the footage. That's not Indigenous people. It's a bunch of college kids. Same in Ontario and the whole bit. So this is what happens. They use this incident, and then they call out their troops and with this thin cover of Indigenous rights, because the thing is, and it only works because Canadians do give a shit, right? If we didn't give a shit, they wouldn't use Indigenous rights, because we'd be like, I don't give a fuck. Right? In the same way they use BLM in the States, because most Americans are very ashamed about the American history with this, or the part of the history that touches their country, huh? So this goes out, and we all saw the results of this. Now, the thing is, and they walked it back even, but nobody paid attention. A couple weeks later, you had this Sarah Bellew come on and say, oh, well, we found disturbances. We don't know exactly, but we're pretty sure, but we don't know exactly.
And the so-called rib bone.
Well, didn't exist. Yeah, Rebel News tracked that down. So I decided, now what interested me when I looked at this was I saw that on her university bio, she listed the fact that she had been trained in the use of ground penetrating radar by, or at, what she asserts is that she was trained to use and certified to use ground penetrating radar in 2016 at CFB Borden, Canadian Forces Base Borden, which, as you know, is the home of the School of Engineering, where that sort of training would go on for the military. So I was very curious by this, and I started blasting the earphones off the telephones of public affairs officers down at Borden. And I sent in a access to information request. And what I asked was simply, I need all records, reports, anything to do with the training of this individual, Dr. Sarah Bellew, at CFB Borden in the use of ground penetrating radar in 2016. So if she was on that base physically and trained in that by the Army or anyone else, I should have got a return. I did not. They came back with absolutely no records.
How long did you wait for any kind of answer?
Hey?
How long did you wait for any kind of answer from them?
Well, how long to get the return? Not that bad. They tried to fight me at first. The PAFO guy said, well, talk to Ottawa, which I did. They didn't get back to me. The Freedom of Information guys at first asserted that they could not give me any information because this is a private individual and not a member of the Canadian Forces. But the thing is, and I told them, I said, she asserts this publicly on a university website. So I'm simply confirming information that she made public, right? And the other questions I had for them were, what was the scope of this training? Who paid for this training? What's the nature of the certification? What does it certify her to do? Within about 2 weeks, I got the return, said, oh, there's nothing there. So next step, I try and contact Dr. Sarah Bellew and the head of her faculty and ask them, okay, well, here's the thing. You say this on your website. The military says, no. Can you explain this? No answer. So then I emailed the executive assistant to the president of the university, a Miss something hyphenated name, something fancy name hyphen fancy name. So I emailed her, and the email was very simple. I said, you on your public websites assert that this, and the military says no. Can you comment on this? And the email I get back, the one email I've received back from this entire university, she said her opening line was, do you always skip the niceties when you send emails? Yeah. So she asserted that the head of the faculty was responsible for that part of the website, and she really can't answer anything. Forwarded to her, I've never heard another thing from them. But 2 days later, her bio was removed from their public websites.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I went ahead and I cracked off the article. I sent an email to them again saying, well, I'm going to take that as a tacit admission that stuff wasn't correct. So I put out the article. Now, a couple of days after that, her bio appeared again with some small revisions, but still asserts she was trained there in 2016. There's been some suggestion that a private company may have been conducting training in GPR shit at that site, or on CFB property, I guess. But again, I'm not sure why they would have absolutely no record of that, or at least refer to it, say, oh, well, this is, if it happened, it would have happened here, and we don't hold those records. They did not. The university has never responded. The only thing they did do is their head of security creeped my LinkedIn, and their head of IT gave me a prank call, because apparently she doesn't understand call display. Yeah, I got, LinkedIn works. I got an email that said, somebody looked at your profile. So I went and looked. Oh, the head of security. Okay, man, maybe you should check out LinkedIn's private browsing function, dipshit. And then I'm doing the dishes, watching my kid, and my phone rings, and I was long getting it. So I pick it up, and I see Calvinder Sour, British Columbia. And I think, oh, maybe it's school. And I'm like, hello. Take it down, still live. Then it goes off. So I Google Calvinder Sour, and she's the head of IT for the University of the Fraser Valley, which is where Miss Bellew works. She is an associate. She was a visiting professor, but right after the Graves thing came out, she made full associate professor. Big pay jump, 80,000 to 160 a year.
Wow,
nice, pays well.
Yeah.
So now the other thing about Sarah Bellew, Dr. Sarah Bellew, the woman, most directly, really, except for Kashmir, behind this hoax, is that, so she gets this training, she says, in 2016. Right away, she started, or even before, she was involved in a documentary project funded by the Ukrainian Canadian Council and Mr. Banderas and stuff like that, making documentaries about the horrible treatment of internees in Canadian camps in World War I. Now, these would have been civilian people, much
German descendants,
Yeah, everybody's heard of the Japanese internment in World War II, but in World War I, we did this to Germans. Mm-hmm. And now Ukraine didn't exist at that time. It was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Yeah. So we would round up the citizens of that. So she did a documentary on a camp in Fernie, BC, where they took a couple of dozen Ukrainian hard rock miners, guys have been working in hard rock mines nearby, and their families, put them in an old abandoned mining town. It hadn't been abandoned that long. It had buildings, they had housing, everything else. They put barbed wire around it, gave them animals, gave them seed, and it was basically just, okay, you got to stay here. I'm not going to vouch for that. I don't know, exactly what the conditions were, but 1914 rural Canada, it was
a tough life for everybody. Yeah,
sure. So, she, out of whole cloth, makes up this story about it being, a near concentration camp. Totally out of whole cloth. She's talking to a couple of descendants of people that were there, but the stories are pretty vague. There's no documentary evidence of anything. She finds a piece of mangled barbed wire and asserts that they made a cross out of it. They were so desperate. Even though they live in big wooden buildings and they have their pictures of them working wood outside with the guards and the wire, one wonders why they wouldn't make one out of wood. The other thing she has is a shovel, and all of this right now is in the Canadian War Museum, by the way, talking about what a bunch of worthless bastards Canada is. And she has a wooden shovel, which she asserts is proof that these people were trying to dig a tunnel to get out of the town. Issue is, if you've ever been to Fernie, BC, you dig down about a foot, you're hitting the Rocky Mountains. You ain't digging nowhere with a wooden shovel, and a hard rock miner sure as fuck would have known that. Right?
Politics. Hey?
So she rumbled around there with her equipment. But I mean, this GPR, this is very complex stuff. people that do this in the real archaeological world. And I guess at this point, it'd be important to mention Dr. Sarah Bellew is an anthropologist, but she's a social anthropologist. So not somebody who dates at all.
Yeah.
She makes up little stories about what society was like based on your tin cans. That's basically what she does.
Well,
so,
I know for a fact that even when I was a kid, I used to be fascinated with when they find dinosaur bones. And if you remember back in 1986, when they found the Franklin expedition up in the high Arctic with frozen bodies, I was fascinated by that. It took them months to get down to the coffin where they found that creepy guy that was wrapped up in that towel that's been dead for 150 years. Because of the ice and because of the shifting polar and the extreme cold, he was preserved, right? But they found him. They took him months to find those coffins. And now when you hear reports about dinosaur bones being found in the Badlands, it's usually a farmer or some kid that finds this bone or this shaving and all that. And anthropologists are right there like fat kids on Smarties digging. Slowly but surely, they dig to find the truth. And we all remember Robert Picton, the pig killer, pig farmer, who killed all those prostitutes over the years.
Oh yeah, he dug up his whole farm.
Well, even like every little piece, every little fragment.
Well, but it's worse than that because in BC there's it's a little girl's name. There's like Sarah's Law or something like that. I can find it. But basically what it says is the BC coroner has a legal obligation to open a file and conduct an investigation on the remains of anyone suspected to be a minor. Right? So I've got a Freedom of Information I got way back last July from BC Coroner. And I asked him, I said, I'd like to see any file numbers associated with any findings of human remains or any other thing at this site, Kamloops, blah, blah, blah. Came back, nada. We don't have a file number. We don't have any human remains. We have not.
And I have a copy of that too, ladies and gentlemen. So I could probably put that display on the description there for you if you like, or get from William's link or whatever. But yeah, I read that report and it said we ain't found shit, basically.
And we're not looking, which would mean legally they must not have a good faith belief that there's the remains of a child, because otherwise legally they would have to go look, and there's no
idea. You'd have to, regardless of the land claim or not, you'd have to have
all of the territory of BC is the territory of BC, so they would be legally obliged to do it.
We'd have to. It just makes sense.
So they don't think there's anything there, and they never did.
And that, and every other grave thereafter too that was supposedly found.
Well, but the thing is, and if you look at what actually happened, and most people did because they got caught up in the 10,000, I think it's up around 15,000 dead kids now. But when they got to Saskatchewan and the 700 or whatever the hell it was, when they interviewed, even on the CBC, when they're interviewing the local Indigenous people, they're not backing this up. They were like, I don't know. There used to be a white town there. I think it was their cemetery. Maybe some of us are buried there. That's what they said directly. They talked to a female elder and she was like, no, I don't think so. This is white people over here. This isn't us. And of course, again, nothing ever found. The Mi'kmaq were running all over Nova Scotia with these goddamn things, but they didn't find anything. Or didn't even try and assert they did. So, yeah. So, okay. So you get this machine turned on. Now the machine is run through these purgs. So my direct experience is in Montreal with a man named Jaggi Singh, who ran QPERG out of Concordia University.
Jaggi Singh? Jagmeet Singh?
Hey?
Jagmeet Singh?
No. It's a man named Jaggi Singh. If you remember the 2001, the Quebec City G7 meeting, right? He arrested this famous globalist, that anti-global activist, Jaggi Singh, and held him in jail for 40 days. You go back to 97, the Summit of the Americas, the UBC, Sergeant Pepper Spray. He was a big activist at that, right?
Okay.
So this guy runs QPERG in Concordia. So he has a budget of $250,000 a year That's what they were getting in 2017. So they are free to spend this money in whatever manner they choose. So in 2016, Donald Trump is elected. Jaggi Singh and Franklin Lopez, our friendly fella, who is, by the way, an American whose daddy was in the Jimmy Carter administration and has ties to the CFR. He's also a multi-millionaire. So Mr. Lopez, the anarchist, is a very rich boy. And I've met the guy. I've seen him work, and I always wondered where the fuck he got his money, because we were always struggling to get 10 cents together, and this guy traveling everywhere. He got all the latest kit. Well, now I know.
He was born into it.
Yeah, well, so they call a training session at Concordia University about resist Trump. This is where the Montreal Antifa was put together and trained. There was even a group of students at the school who saw what was going on, tried to protest outside the training session. They were attacked by about 40 blacked up, masked up Antifa members, got shit kicked out of them. Montreal police show up, they don't know what's happening. So they, over the weekend, they put hundreds of people. They brought up fucking hardcore Antifa guys from the States, Rose City Antifa in Portland, and they trained them in all kinds of shit, right? So about 6 months later, and I don't know, there was another weird little group suddenly popped up in Quebec, because they like to have little groups on both sides of the aisle. Never think they're only funding one side of a fight. Right? So all of a sudden, this nationalist movement pops up in Quebec called the Meute, and they're going to have a little march in Quebec City in August, I think, of 2017. I might have checked that. But so they're just going to walk through Quebec City, and they support, less immigration and lots of French language. And, not an unusual thing in Quebec. So Jaggi Singh and QPERG put out a big call out to go up and protest this. And they rent 6 or 8 school buses with QPERG money, with their big budget. And they move about 500 Antifa troops up to Quebec City for that weekend. They rip the place apart. There's mainstream articles. They rip the place apart. Yeah, beat the crap out of a bunch of people. They had really charming, and of course they're all Antifa up, they're all black stuff, and really charming. They had got them to buy super soakers and fill them with urine and ink and spray that at people, right? There's film of one of them spraying it at a woman with a stroke, right? But again, he led them up there. He organized this, trained it, and led it up there, all with basically taxpayer money, because the funds QPERG has, every student, when you go to university, you have to pay like $100. Every kid pays $100 for students groups, and that gets divvied out. But when you got 100,000 students or 20,000 students or whatever, that's a lot of cash.
Yeah.
Right. In these groups, the university's position is, oh, well, they're independent, corporations. We can't do anything, even though the only funding they get is from us, and the only reason they exist is us. I'm not sure the actual legal status, but I know I after the riot in Quebec City, I phoned up the dean of students at Concordia University and said, what the literal fuck, bro? So this network, again, it exists across Canada in universities in every province, and this network is ready to go again. This time it'll be climate, what I'm at. But these networks will have to be taken out. And the one thing we can do is you can contact your local university, go to their website or whatever, and look for some version of public interest research group, or just phone them up and ask them if they have. And if they do, share this information with them and tell them, I want you to close this group down. Right? If the people who had their churches burned, some of those historic churches, they should be filing lawsuits
Oh, I would say so. There should have been prosecution. I'm not a religious man myself, William. I'm not religious whatsoever. But you know as well as I do, as soldiers, we were told to respect places of worship. Wartime, peacetime, or peace operations, you respect places of worship, because there's still an abundance of our society that goes to churches and mosques and in synagogues and other temples for their own personal reflection or for their own personal right to do so. Watching those churches burn was, wow, like, holy shit.
Well, I know some of those churches. I'm from Alberta. That one in Lacombe, I've walked by that. I mean, these are
it was beautiful
historical sites. These are the sites where these tiny little communities in this vast ice blasted prairies first came together in the 1800s.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, it's inexcusable whether you're religious or not, and it's part of a calculated attack. Right?
Oh,
they want what they view as the fundamentals of our identity.
Yeah.
Right? Christian religion, or you know, the general Judeo. Even if you're a Canadian, even if you're not religious, you're still kind of raised under a generally Judeo-Christian sort of moral
principles and morals. Principles and morals.
That's the story. But this is this is an organized activity, and it is ongoing, and it will keep going until we stop it. That's it.
What would your recommendation be, let's say, to stop these organizations?
Well, again, I mean, I think wherever you are in your area, look at your local university. If they have one of these groups, if you're anywhere near Ottawa or in Ontario, right, because you're the one with it, it's your tax dollar paying for it. Yeah, start organizing, start an organized letter campaign, get a whack of people to start phoning the deans and the administration of these schools and say, you need to shut these groups down. We know what's going on, and you need to shut them down. Right? I mean, the Carleton one, I don't know. I would think somebody could try and lay a charge under the Anti-Terrorism Act. There's no statute of limitations. I mean, you look through that article, I mean, Jesus Christ, they trained in rail blockades, and then there was a rail blockade. They trained in how to use repelling stuff, and then there was a blockade off a bridge. And one of the guys is right there. Those are terrorist acts. Even if if you look at the Anti-Terrorism Act, it specifically cites economic disruption.
What gets me is, what would be the projected end game of what they're doing? That's the thing, because it's
the dissolution of the nation state. It's no different than the WEF and all of it. It's all the same game, right? Now this is, every kid in Canada, they go to goddamn school and they got to stand up and say, I acknowledge I'm not in Canada. Yeah, that piece of shit chief of the defense staff do one of those things. I know that motherfucker. He was in MADAC, that goofy little prick. He's a fucking brown noser then, he still is. And I mean, like everything I get from the Nova Scotia government says, we acknowledge we're on the unceded land of the Micmac. No, we're fucking not. They signed 3 fucking treaties, and you better strap up. Because I'm absolutely for Indigenous rights. I want to get rid of that odious fucking Indian Act, and we redo the Constitution. Why not? At least our Gallic cousins won't have the center of attention this time. But redo in whatever form that would be, but make us equals in this place.
Oh, fair enough. Exactly. And proper equality, meaning everyone has the opportunity to do something. Everyone, the opportunity.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to say that, again, most Indigenous people are not, they're not jumping on board, because they realize, and here's the thing, you were talking earlier about we're not racist, this, that, the other thing. If you give a fuck about Indigenous people, you need to stop this too. And if you want a lesson for that, you go look at the groups that have been used in color revolutions. Look at how ISIS is doing in Syria. Look at how them pricks are doing in Libya. Egypt. I mean, they got a military dictator. These guys, it doesn't end well, especially if you lose. Right? So yeah, this is, and it's not designed to give them, and it goes beyond that. I mean, the fishing dispute, right where I bought my house, was where the big lobster war was, right? Or fucking RCMP SWAT all over this place, man. So all that hubbub happens in the background. The biggest fishery license holder here is sold to China in a deal that had a very light smear of Micmac participation, a $6.5 billion deal. Clearwater was sold to a holding company in Vancouver that tracks back to the CCP. Right? But it was all like, oh, Indigenous rights, like, you know, but there's the thing, right? Okay, so I absolutely support the Indigenous person's right to go fish and hunt, and they don't need no damn license from me if they're supporting themselves or their community. Okay, but that does not mean you have the boat with radar and go out in a fleet and fish lobster. No. Not until we find those traditional diesel plants. Until the archaeologists come over, you can't on one hand yell traditional right that could only exist using modern equipment. You see what I'm saying?
I can understand that. I can understand.
Yeah, like, I mean, I interviewed for I think he calls it Canadian Buffalo Chronicle or something like that. Anyway, like the fishermen were getting a raw deal, I felt. So I took my camera down and I interviewed the head of the fishermen's union. And you know, and I believe it because I've talked to a lot of people around here. They're very supportive of an Indigenous fishery. But what's happening is not that. It's just they're basically sweeping the ocean. There won't be anything left for anybody.
And they're using the First Nations as fodder for it to represent.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what happens, and I have this directly from Nova Scotia fishermen, so they get these sort of free dibs on these incredibly expensive licenses that you have to buy to get lobster, right? After you paid for your boat and everything else. They were given boats. Well, here's an example. The guy that was the supposed head of the Micmac fishery here, he's Donald Marshall's kid, but he has a different name. Okay, so the federal government had given this guy $6 million worth of boats and equipment, right? So guess what he does? He sells the boats to somebody of his and then leases them back. Right, because you know these guys don't go for the honest brokers in these Indigenous communities. This guy, his name's escaping me, but this guy, before he became the face of the Indigenous fishery, he was one of the biggest fucking meth dealers in this area. Worked with the fucking Hells Angels. The guy right before the guy I interviewed that was the head of the fishery union here quit because the Hells Angels were phoning his house. His brother, this dude's brother, got picked up for not possessing but making child porn. These are Donald Marshall's sons or grandsons. Donald Marshall was the original Micmac guy who won the court case. But, you know, again, the court case says that, you know, and rightly so, they don't need a license from us to go fish and hunt in these territories, right? But that's for their own subsistence, and that's what it says, right? And so, again, you know, the fishermen here and Canadians in general are incredibly supportive of Native rights, of you know, getting Native communities.
Oh, I'd say it here too. Yeah, big time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, like there's some really switched on Indigenous communities in Alberta.
Big conversations with Indian Resources Council when I was doing my campaign last year, and just down to earth, great people.
Yeah, and they don't want to be part of this shit.
Yeah, they just want to carry on. We all want to carry on.
Yeah, at the end of the day, well, let's just say they've seen shiny beads before. They know what comes after the shiny beads. Right?
We all do.
So, you know, and there are many issues which Canadians like us and them have in common. Immigration, like, holy fuck. They want to make this place 100 million people? Where's Native rights then? None of those people are going to have any attachment to Indigenous people. Right? People like us who grew up here, I mean, we've known them all our lives, and we you know, obviously we have felt a need to try and make amends for some of our past, right? But these people will not. They will not give a shit, right? Any more than they give a shit about us.
Well,
right?
you can say the same thing about some of the higher officials sitting in Ottawa and every provincial capital too. What exactly do they care about when it comes to the rights of people here? I was raised in a household where you judge people based on their actions. And if someone happens to be from this culture or that culture or this gender or that gender, and they're a shithead, well, guess what? They're a shithead. It doesn't matter, right? They all come in all shapes and sizes. And you know as well as I do too, from serving in the military, we didn't see color or gender. We saw a uniform. You know?
Oh, well, God knows what they see now. They can't even say the word woman. I don't even know if they know what fucking bathroom to use.
I'm sorry, warrant officer. My skirt's not pleated. I have to go take a time out. Yes.
I mean, I got to tell you, as a Canadian soldier, given a lot of the behavior in recent years of the Canadian Force, I mean, I know Remembrance Day. I don't know how you feel about this, but it's going to be an issue for me. My little community, like what? I'm going to go stand down by a cenotaph beside people who spent 2 years phoning the cops on their fucking neighbors because grandma came by, and a whole bunch of uniformed RCMP. I don't fucking know, man. My daddy landed.
I look at my history and my pride.
Normandy, man, this is not what he fucking. This is not what he.
That's the thing. It's not what we fought for, and what you experienced in Medak Pocket. Even the politics around that whole battle too was just phenomenal, because the consensus was the Canadians didn't even know about till about 2 years after the fact.
Sure, yeah.
And I met Mr. Deering when I was working in Gagetown on a tasking. I think I was working.
Oh, Rock and Rod! How fun was that?
He was the course. It was one of the course warrants, and I was tasked as an ML driver. And here I am, a young buck private in the RCR. Just eager to please, volunteering. Okay, I'll go to Gagetown for 6 weeks and play in the snow. Okay. And he was probably the most laid back NCO I ever met. And he was telling me about some rumblings in regards to what he saw in Croatia. And I knew there was a battle. I just didn't hear a lot about it because, peacekeepers don't do that sort of thing. Bullshit.
Sure.
Yeah. That was the narrative I was told as a young buck, and a lot of Canadians were told. But he didn't really have to say much to know that there was a lot of shit that went on in that country, not just in his rotation, but a lot of rotations before and after too. In regards to policy, in regards to what's being said, what you saw, what you didn't see.
Sure.
A lot of shit.
I found out since that, the U.S. intelligence services were providing drones for the fucking Croatian forces. That's fun. Yeah. I mean, the one thing I'll say about the whole Medak thing is this, is that really the cover-up of the thing was engineered by a guy named Robert Fowler. He was the Associate Minister of Defense, a long-time Liberal fella, under Chrétien. Yeah, he's the one who cacked the Somalia inquiry because of Mafeking. He is the one who ordered documents shredded and ordered complete radio silence on the Medak thing. Career fucking Mandarin. 2008, as a reward for his service, he had been given an ambassadorship in Africa. So 2008, he's bombing around Africa with a couple other guys in a fucking truck somewhere, and he gets grabbed by El fucking Shabaab, wouldn't you know it. They kept him for 9 fucking months. And I don't know what the fuck they did to that little prick, but I saw him when he came back. They had him come to the House of Commons, right? We got a box lunch, and good job, boys. He goes to the House of Commons, and he stands up while they all clap. He could barely stand up, though. That man was broken in his body, broken in his soul. And you know what the lesson is there, kids? Karma is a fucking bitch, so don't be an asshole.
Well, especially in a position of leadership like that, too. Canada should have been told the truth in regards to that, because you and I both served with members of the Airborne, one way or the other, and they weren't bad guys. The guys I knew, the guys that trained me, that looked after my sorry ass as a buck private, they weren't bad lads. Like I would be upset.
There were some structural issues because what happened, I guess, like I'd be kind of a generation, I guess, before you in terms of period of service, I guess.
I was in 98, so that's when I first got in.
That's when okay, see, I was out by 97. So yeah, pretty good. So exactly a generation before. Over the years, the airborne regiment, unfortunately, had become a dumping ground for discipline problems. Right, you're off a battalion, the Patricia, the RCR, and you're a real good soldier, but Jesus, fucking Christ, just an animal. You know that guy. We all know that guy.
Yeah.
And so it'd be like, hey, why don't you go for the airborne, buddy? You're gonna fit in right over there, no problem. Because by that time, the airborne's actual primary military role was kind of bullshit. You're never going to have a mass airborne drop. It's not happening. Not in real combat. Not against the Russians or anybody like that. And I think a lot of the effect was probably the methylquin and whatnot. Some of the stuff they were giving them because, you look at their sort of behavior and it spiked as soon as they got tasked. Really went off the rails. Like somebody put a round through the RSM's fucking window. That wasn't normal airborne behavior. So there was definitely something the fuck wrong. And they cut the inquiry before they got to it and it most likely was methylquin. Because I knew Kyle Brown. Right? Clayton Matchee and Kyle Brown from Somalia beat that kid to death. I knew Kyle Brown quite well. Very soft-spoken man. When I saw those pictures, my fucking jaw was on the floor. And Matchee's widow to this day has maintained there was something fucking wrong there. That's not her husband.
Yeah,
right.
So the speculation I remember there too, and a few lads that didn't really want to talk about it, especially at the time with me when I was just just a young private. What the fuck? Get away from me.
Sure.
The whole hierarchy of things too. But a couple of sergeant majors I knew that were just really bang on, good guys, great leaders.
Sure,
and they would say because of what they learned in the airborne, the dedication, discipline, and I remember watching the footage and the outrage of all the citizens. It's like, well, wait a minute, there's more to it than just this. I knew that as a civilian at the time. There's more to it than just CBC taking the story and screwing the military around, because it eventually got to a point where everyone in uniform was a fucking target by somebody.
Oh my God, dude. I was in fucking Croatia when this shit was started really hitting the papers, yo. I'm fucking sitting at one of the OPs. I open up the Halifax Chronicle Herald because they'd send us the newspapers, right? The fucking political cartoon is two Canadian soldiers raising a Canadian flag, but it's a bloody handprint instead of a maple leaf. Oh, that's nice. That's nice with the morning bucket coffee.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're at the point of the episode 2. If you have any questions for myself or Willie Ray, please do not hesitate. Ask us anything you'd like to know, just as long as you keep it clean and realistic and nothing belligerent. But please speak your minds. I encourage this when I do my live streams.
If you'd like to in future, like I said, I've done a hell of a lot of work on identity politics. And again, this is not a bunch of just separate things that kind of happened at the same time. This is a unified program. And I've got it all the way to the roots. So in the future, if you want to get together and have a chin wag about that, because I know CRT is big in the forces right now. Jesus.
Oh, just grievances. And even when I was an instructor, things that you couldn't say or things you couldn't do. And I remember some instructors I had when I was, a young buck private, and some of the shit that they say to me, it goes in one ear and it goes out the other, because that's all part of the training.
Well, there's a purpose to it. There's a purpose to it, because the thing is, if you start wavering
with this rifle, can you take that trench if it ever happened? Can you toss this grenade? Can you post this grenade? Can you?
Well, can you just not curl up in a fucking ball and whine? Yeah, because that happened. That happened.
Yeah, and true.
And sometimes it's a guy you would never think.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
yeah, like, I mean, you have to have some base filter there to, and some kids I washed off basic back in the day. I tell them that. I said, listen, you're not a bad fucking guy. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not blah, blah, blah. You don't have the parts it would take to do this job.
yeah.
Right? Because
and there's nothing wrong with that with some people.
Or shit is getting really chaotic around you, you don't react well. And I can't give you a rubber stamp and send you somewhere where people are going to fucking shoot at you if you can't handle this.
Yeah.
So, that's just the way it is. So what you're turning out now are people who will fucking curl up in a little ball when the rounds start flying. Lots of them.
Yeah, that's not right. Because
Well,
I remember my first
die.
firefight. Well, I remember my first firefight, and I'm like, oh fuck, where'd that come from? Okay, I'm watching the tracer to see where that fucker is, or
Sure.
fuckers. Like my head's up a bit, but then it's down again. It's up, it's down.
Sure.
Okay, where's it coming
Well,
from? Then I'm listening to my radio.
Enough to maintain the basic stress of just having a bullet go by your head.
Yeah.
And even with the old school training I went through, like, we still had a few people that did not react well to the stress of combat.
Yeah.
Now you're going to have units.
Yeah.
Because they've never been yelled at. I had a buddy, no names, no pacto. He was a signaler for me in the artillery. He went on to become chief targeting officer of the Royal Canadian Air Force. Spent time in Iraq and one of them little tents in the desert. And he was saying they had some kind of fucking safe space or some kind of chill space or some shit. Yeah.
Yeah, those emotional cards they tried to, I guess, at one time in Saint Jean. Yeah.
Emotional.
Yeah. I never saw it during my basic. There was rumblings of it. But
I remember, like, way back, I'm in the 80s, right? So it was just the first very faint rumblings of human rights in the military, right? So my sergeant major, King Billy Martins, of at the time 3 RCHA, beautiful fucking just beast of a man. He got everybody together in one of the big lecture auditoriums, and he got the board. He's got the board up there, and he walks up and writes human rights on the board. And he just walks back to the front of the word, big word, big letters. Walks back to the front of the word. Scribble, 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 scribble. And he just turns around and says, you fucks have the right to do what you're told. You have the right to do it right the fuck now. Any questions about your human rights? Okay, you've had your government mandated human rights lecture. Get the fuck out of here. And you know what? It worked just fine. So, yeah, but we gotta fight this. I mean, I'm planning to go into court in Nova Scotia here against the education system. Because if we let them keep fucking these kids up, they're not gonna know snow from mud.
Yeah.
And that's a bone cold fact. They don't even know what boys and girls are. And that's a very deliberate thing. You want to rip a society apart. Right? Like, if you want to think of it in the longer term, from my point of view, one of the questions the 911 truth movement never asked, and really should have, why was it so fucking obvious? Right? Building 7, that's like closed captions for the understanding impaired. Right? In case somebody didn't know, you're supposed to see some shit.
Yeah.
Right? And what's the goal? The goal is to cause mistrust, cause a disconnect between the citizens and their government. And, well, didn't it? If you believe your government brought 2 buildings down. I don't
know what to say on that. My conspiracies towards that is, I don't know. I never really thought about it, but my concentration was on Canada and the elected officials.
Well, sure, but I mean, the point is simply don't think that you see the trick all the time. I think a lot of people right now have the problem of thinking they see the trick. I wouldn't be so sure, because sometimes the trick is very deep. The best example I have, it's another American one, but I think this will get the point across. Most people are sort of routinely familiar with the circumstances of the killing of John F. Kennedy in Dallas in 1963. Yeah. So for those of you who aren't, real rough, and you can check everything I'm saying here. Lee Harvey Oswald, according to the Warren Commission, Lee Harvey Oswald killed John F. Kennedy from the Dallas School Book Depository building from the 6th floor. He got that job through a man named George de Mohrenschildt, who had a bit of a hazy history with intelligence guys. A white Russian emigre, so someone who'd left Russia after the revolution. So, you know, and they would have got away with it, right? Except, lucky us, there was this dressmaker guy who happened to catch it on film, yeah? Right? And now, you know, we can see for ourselves that, oh, well, you know, he wasn't shot in the back of the head, right? So lucky us, right? Here's the thing. George de Mohrenschildt, or well, I guess I'll start with the Texas School Book Depository building is, that's what we call it. Its real name is the McLeod building, and that was its name up until 8 months before the shooting, when the Texas School Book Depository Company moved on in. It got the lease off a man named Willaim R. Byrd. Willaim R. Byrd was a Texas billionaire type. One of his close friends and associate was George de Mohrenschildt, which is how Lee Harvey Oswald got the job in the building. One of the other activities that Mr. Byrd and Mr. de Mohrenschildt were engaged in together was something called the Dallas International Council. So this was big money, ex-military guys got together, tried to influence policy. One of the other members of the board of this organization, who is recorded in minutes speaking with de Mohrenschildt, speaking with Byrd, is a man named Abraham Zapruder, the completely unconnected dressmaker who took that film. So, as an experiment, I'd ask your viewers to do this. Now, I was a cameraman. I covered the big riots in Montreal. So, I know a lot about cameras in very energetic environments. The camera this man was using, you're looking through a pen, you know, an empty pen. That's your viewfinder, and that is the same as your lens. It's a very old camera. So when you breathe up and down, you know what I mean? If anybody ever used an old Super 8, you just breathe and your frame moves up and down. You might lose the bottom of your frame, sort of thing. The slightest movement with those old Super 8s, like the slightest movement, a shake of your hand, you're done, buddy. And there's no image stabilization in this shit, right? None at all, right? So you get a blurred image, that's it, you're done, right?
Yeah.
So knowing that Mr. Zapruder might have been in on the joke, actually have a look at the film and step back and just look. Look at how fucking smooth that pan is. Look at how smooth that is. From a man who just bought the camera and is standing, being supported by his secretary on a 6-foot sort of cement pillar. So when the car gets in front of him, the famous headshot scene, when he takes that, this man is standing way above the ground, completely out in the open. And I mean, you know what he's hearing when those rounds are coming in.
Yeah.
You know what he's hearing. I know what he's hearing. And he sure as shit would have known what he was hearing. Not only does our hero not jump off that fucking 6-foot thing he's standing on in the middle of nowhere as he watches a man's head come apart 35 feet from him, but he has the smoothest pan in history on the way out, doesn't he? Catches Jackie on the car. Now, again, this is a man, no combat experience, a simple dressmaker. He's hearing bam, 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 bam. Because even if there's only 3 shots, that's going to ricochet off every building around you.
You're going to hear it. Yeah.
Well, hell yeah, that's going to sound
you're
like
going to hear it.
Fucking corral, baby. But you don't even shake, man. You don't even flinch when that dude's head comes apart.
Yeah.
Never think you see the trick. Because again, what was the result of all the controversy about the Kennedy thing? No real solving, but again, you undermining the belief and the confidence in the nation state, in the society. So,
yeah. Well, I hear you.
I think it's good to be careful and never think, oh, I got it.
Yeah.
These people are very smart, very, very smart. They have a lot of money to hire even smarter people. Okay. So,
Yeah.
I mean, good job, everybody out there on Google and stuff. And we're all working our asses off. But again, just be careful never to think you completely got it, because it's probable that you don't. I don't think I do. I can see a little bit of it and I'm happy, but.
Well, definitely. Well, right now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take some questions. If anyone is watching, doesn't matter if you're on the Rumble platform, on the YouTube, or the Facebook platform, please do not hesitate to ask myself or William a question in regards to what we were discussing this evening. GDR the Maker from my YouTube page there. Glad I'm not the only one in the family getting this stuff out there. Cheers, cuz you got this. Oh, okay. Hi, Crusty. Well, hello, GDR the Maker.
Hello,
Now,
GDR.
if anyone here has any questions for William, please let me know right away. Right. Thank you.
Like
again,
I said,
GDR.
I will stick all of this. I'll send you an email with. I'll watch it again, stick some times in, and I'll put the different references for everything I'm saying.
Oh, by all means, yes. And ladies and gentlemen, when this video gets posted on my pages, wait out for the descriptions there. Wait out for the links in the description there too. This is basically off the cuff for William and I too. We've played email tag for the past better part of a year now, trying to get together to get him on my show or on his platform or my platform. However, here he is in the flesh. So thank you again, GDR.
We're building quite a good network. Like there's a lot of you guys out there doing really well, and yeah, and I mean, I think that would be the important thing. If we can network, share resources, share, help
by all means,
material out. I think that's key, because I concentrate most on writing. I have a small child. I'm building a farm. I can't guarantee that I can sit down at a given time and do something.
No doubt. That's the thing. Because we don't have the luxury of having a journalist degree and sitting in front of a camera 24/7.
Right.
Justin Trudeau, a smart ass I know from British Columbia. Adam, yes, Adam is a very busy lad. So Adam is quite the consummate actor at the moment. He is working professionally, hard and diligently. So there are times where he cannot make an appearance. But yeah, I'll pass a message off there, Justin, for you if you like. Let's see, from excuse me, Delta Mail. How about chemtrail programs? What's your take on that, William?
Well, for sure, I've seen a hell of a lot of large transport aircraft, and I know what an actual vehicle contrail should look like. And certainly over Nova Scotia, I see some pretty sketchy shit. It's not something I've looked into, but I mean, these guys openly talk about modifying weather, and then Gates has some jackass plan to cool the planet. So, I mean, there certainly could be something to it, but not something I have had the time to pursue, I suppose. So I don't really know anything about it other than what I do visually see with my eyes over Nova Scotia, which is a lot of very suspicious looking large streaks behind aircraft that last for hours. Yeah. So definitely somebody should get on it.
Oh, we've seen it here too. I remember. That's right. You lot sorted out. Get on that goddamn thing.
Get on it.
Exactly. So, what about what's that story that happened in 1967? The UFO sighting.
Out in here. Yeah, we were gonna go. They have every year. They have a little. They have some sort of an event to commemorate it, and I was going to go out and see it next year. It's interesting for sure. Interesting.
Yeah, Canada's version of Roswell, I guess you can say.
I guess, yeah. I haven't got out there so far, but I'm going to try to for sure. Nice out here. Great house prices. Need more people. So if you're out west. If you sell your house, man, you can buy some huge shit here and have money in your pocket. Big money.
Yes,
right? Like 95 grand, you sell the average place for 300 back there. If you're halfway into your mortgage, at least you'd come out here, you could buy something cash and maybe have a little money in your pocket. A lot of fixer uppers, like a lot of old houses that have stayed in the family, but the families dwindled off. Like, not a lot of young people in Nova Scotia.
Mhm.
I mean, I remember when I was a kid, half the East Coast seemed to be in Alberta every time there was an oil boom.
Yeah.
So I guess a lot of them stayed out there and had their families because, yeah, it's sort of an aging population. And so it's nice. They've had a huge influx of Ontarians, people from the West, probably, being spurred by the pandemic to get a house under them, and this being a good place to do it. So,
And is your land workable? Can you create a crop and harvest?
we got about 2 acres that we cleared. We had to get a guy in with a big Komatsu excavator because we're just overrun with alder, lots of alder. So he came in, he pulled. So we've got the wife's got, I think, 4,300 square feet of rows ready for vegetables next year.
Nice.
We grew some this year. But the soil's very acidic and lacking nutrients, so we amended very heavily, and next year we should be rocking. And she intends to grow for us and have enough left over to sell at local farmers markets. And there's something all over Canada starting called the Fringe Farm Network that I've got involved with. So this is people, I guess, generally who are thinking like us and who happen to own farms. So to get together and share resources and work to set up markets together and that kind of stuff, help distribute, because, certainly could be needing some food pretty quick here.
Yeah, that's the thing. And with what's happening with the Dutch farmers, and of course, Papa Trudeau wants to mimic the same thing because he likes to slap and tickle his buddies at WEF, right? And
for sure. And the frightening part is like the WEF bunch and the CFR and a lot of these different groups, and definitely directly identity politics, all trace back to the same grouping, same family foundations that brought us eugenics. So that's not good. That's probably not good.
No, I see. And, I wouldn't be surprised, let's say, if, they pass legislation between now and the next federal election, if more people got in tractors and had another convoy again. Yeah.
Well, I think I believe that they truly believe that the best way to win a hockey game is own both fucking teams. So I'm a little suspicious about, like, everybody seems to be going to sleep because, okay, well, Poilievre's going to come save us. I mean, whether you like that guy or not, the Conservative Party itself has a somewhat suspicious past in this regard. They signed the fucking migrant compact. They signed the thing with China there, it's like a FIPA, like a free trade agreement where if they set up infrastructure,
Trans-Pacific.
Yes. Yeah, and that thing is just insane. We can't pass laws that'll fuck with their investment. What?
Yeah. And what are they investing? What is China investing in Canada now other than a few observatories and some mining rights?
Well, but those mines, again, so more of the indigenous thing, none of it is, ground zero for a lot of this. And so they've signed this Talyurup agreement with Nunavut that gives them basically sovereignty over most of the area up in the Arctic, even though the people in Nunavut, they really aren't that closely related to people over in the Northwest Territories. They control it. This agreement was negotiated by a woman who, at the time she negotiated this agreement between Canada and the Innu, was a paid consultant for Tides Canada, $80,000 a year.
Okay, slap and tickle, slap and tickle.
And so this gives them a lot of rights to give out mineral, to give out. That's what you're going to see with this green revolution. Of course, you need a lot of that metal from up there, and it's going to be Chinese companies, not us. And yeah, I mean, the Liberal Party, they've been in bed with the Chinese. I mean, I regard China as being the model New World Order fascist state. This is what they want worldwide.
Yeah. Fuck them.
Yeah. Well, they're getting there. They're fucking getting there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, people like us and a ton of other people keep sharing information like this. This is how we got this far. I mean, 5 years ago, I thought we were fucking dead, bro. Nobody had a clue anything was going on.
I remember when he was elected, and before my mother passed away, my mother was a staunch Trudeau supporter, even in the 60s. She loved the man. She loved the Beatles, and she loved Pierre Trudeau, right? And my old man couldn't stand him. My grandfather couldn't stand him. And, you know, when I was getting older and actually reading more and studying more, I ended up hating the guy too. Because my concern with the Liberal Party is there's nothing liberal about them. Farthest, what you and I understand of liberalism, they don't do it. You know, honestly. You know, I believe in live and let live. Do what you want to do. Just don't hit people, take their stuff. Yet these clowns, oh yeah, live and let live as long as we agree with you. And we might hit you, we might take your stuff, but eventually we'll do one or the other. You know, so that's it's
well,
they
track back to the genesis of Canada. They track back to the elites, the Canadian elites, and that's who supports them. It's the West, the Westons, the fucking Irvins, the Robertsons out on the prairies. They're these oligarchical families. They're all in on this. Absolutely.
Oh, it's just like the family compact, like in the Upper Canada Rebellion, the family compact. You know. Well,
this is exactly what you have again, and we've had it for quite some time. You even look at the civil service. I mean, most of these guys, their daddy was a civil servant. Like in Ottawa, and again, I'm not against immigration, but I remember I dealt with veterans issues through Senator Dallaire's office back in the early 2000s. And I was really shocked when I got to Ottawa, and a lot of the senior civil service people I was meeting obviously didn't originate in Canada. Mm-hmm. And these were very senior level people. And I'm like, well, how the fuck is that?
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do you move here and get a job at this level in this, I barely know anybody.
And in the same sense, when someone moves to Canada who's a medical practitioner or electrical engineer,
we won't let them
drive a fucking cab.
Sure,
so how is that? How is that fair? Sure. They study medicine differently in South Africa or India. Medicine's medicine, is it not?
I mean, I mean, I got no problem with maybe making sure that there's some standard maintained. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously the immigration policy in general has not been rigged out for either our benefit or the immigrants.
Yeah.
Right, because they want to fill the country, but they don't give a shit about these people any more than they do us. It's a vote bank for them.
Yeah.
Right. Because I mean, you're gonna whatever the hell kind of insane benefits these guys are getting, right? Because I mean, my granddaddy he homesteaded in Roxford Bridge, Alberta, in 1904. His first family home was a hole in the fucking ground with some logs over. They gave him what he could clear.
Yeah.
Right. So, I got no problem with immigration, but it's for you to make your way here. It's not for us to make your way here.
Well, it's the same thing. What if we had to pack up and go, let's say, to old Europe? What would we have to do? Adapt to the surroundings, do what we know what we can contribute to something, work our way out.
All that fucking techno music, Oh, hell no.
No, it's gotta be rock and roll. Guitar, bass, and drums. None of this fucking Eurodance shit. No, none of that. Give me some fucking Motorhead and I'm rocking and rolling. So I'll be happy there. But all right, ladies and gentlemen, any more questions for myself or Willaim, please? You can reach Willaim at stormhaven1@live.com. There'll be information and contact in my description for you all to wonder and ask Willaim, pick his brain.
Sure, and I'd be happy to come back and blab on some of these other subjects whenever it's convenient for you, sir.
Oh, not a problem. Not a problem. We'll look forward to having you back sometime too. So if there's any more questions, please, what I like to do with my live stream is just get a way into where everyone is writing from or watching from. So please let me know. You don't have to give me your exact address, just your town and your province, please. So if you got something to ask myself or William, please do at the same time. So like I said, my guest has been Willaim Ray, owner and operator and CEO of StormHaven Media, independent journalist, family man, farmer, Canadian patriot, veteran, no bullshitter, and truth seeker, ladies and gentlemen. So, well, no questions, but good show. Appreciate the info. Well, you're welcome there, Justin. Right on.
All right. Well, I think I'll go put my kid to bed there.
Oh yeah, it must be getting late for you there too, eh? Yeah. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen,
yeah, it's like 8:30, going on 8:30 here.
Okay. Well, must be getting late for the little guy, right? So,
my little
or you
guy
just want to get rid of him. You want to have a drink. Daddy, you go to bed. Daddy needs a cocktail. That's right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, another successful live stream here in the Crusty Canuck podcast. I've been your host, Crusty Canuck, and with me tonight has been my very special guest, Willaim Ray. As I mentioned, he is a freelance journalist, writer extraordinaire, truther, blogger, owner, and operator of StormHaven Media. You might find his work online there too. I'll leave links in the description for you to follow Willaim at your own leisure. But as always, like I say, do what you can to each other out in these trying times. I want to thank you, Willaim, for coming out. You're welcome here anytime. You are a friend of the podcast.
We're happy to be here.
Right. And we will discuss further events sometime in the future. So thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen, for sticking around this whole time. This is probably one of my longest live streams in a while. But needless to say, I hope nothing but good things for you all out there. I'm back to my work schedule again. So 10 days on, then 4 days off. So you've seen another podcast probably coming in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. Maybe sooner. It depends when I get off early or not. But I work about 10-hour shifts. So when I get home, the last thing I want to do is get political. But for you, my audience, I might make an exception. So we'll see. It's been a good summer so far. I've been very grateful. I'm very blessed. And like I say, ladies and gentlemen, I wish nothing but great things for you all out there. So do what you can to help each other in these trying times. And like I always say, humanity and merit wins the day. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Hit it, sweetheart. Because I am hard, you will not like me. Yes, sir. There is no racial bigotry here. Here you are all equally worthy.
This has been another episode of the Crusty Canuck podcast. Stay sane and thank you for listening. From Western Canada, this is the Crusty Canuck podcast.